The fluorescent lights hummed above the cramped ready room at Naval Air Station Fallon, Nevada. Lieutenant Commander Vera Ghost Kowalski sat alone at the metal briefing table, her weathered flight notebook spread before her. The pages contained 23 years of accumulated wisdom, attack patterns, weather quirks, mechanical tells that textbooks never mentioned. Her calloused fingers traced the faded ink of an entry from Afghanistan, 2009, a mission that went sideways. 3 pilots lost. She'd been the only one to make it back. The coffee had gone cold hours ago. Outside, the desert wind rattled the windows, carrying the distant whine of F-18 Super Hornets conducting night operations. At 44, Ghost was ancient by fighter pilot standards. The younger aviators called her Grandma when they thought she couldn't hear. They didn't know about the silver star hidden in her desk drawer, or why she never flew lead anymore. They didn't need to know. The door exploded inward without warning. 4 figures in full tactical gear swept into the room, weapons drawn but pointed down SEALs, their trident insignia barely visible in the harsh light. Ghost didn't flinch. Her hand remained steady on the notebook page. Lieutenant Commander Kowalski, the lead operator said, his voice muffled by the balaclava. "You need to come with us. Now." She looked up slowly, gray eyes meeting his through the tactical goggles. "Unless the world's ending, gentlemen, I'm off duty." "Ma'am, with respect, it might be." The SEAL's tone shifted, urgent, not threatening. "Admiral Reeves' orders. Operation Blackwater is active. They need you airborne in 30 minutes. Blackwater. The code word hit her like ice water. She'd helped write that contingency plan 15 years ago, praying it would never be used. It meant one thing: an American submarine was down, location unknown, crew running out of air. And someone very high up believed she was the only pilot who could find it. Ghost closed the notebook with deliberate calm. "My flight status was downgraded to instructor only 2 years ago." "Overruled by SECNAV himself, ma'am. Your country needs you." The SEAL stepped aside, revealing a flight suit and gear bag. "Your old bird's being prepped on the flight line. Reaper Squadron's already airborne, waiting for you to take lead." Reaper Squadron, the Navy's most elite reconnaissance unit. Pilots half her age with reflexes she no longer possessed. Yet they wanted her leading them into whatever nightmare was unfolding somewhere in the Pacific. She stood, feeling every old injury protest. A compressed spine from an ejection over Iraq. Shrapnel scars that ached when storms approached. But muscle memory was already taking over, her mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept her alive through 4 wars. "Tell me about the sub," she said, reaching for the flight suit. "USS Colorado, Seawolf class. Last contact was 72 hours ago, somewhere in the Mariana Trench. 140 souls aboard." The room suddenly felt smaller. A Seawolf going dark in the deepest part of the ocean. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was threading a needle in hell while blindfolded. The younger pilots would need someone who'd done the impossible before. Someone who understood that sometimes experience mattered more than reaction time. Ghost zipped up the flight suit, feeling its familiar weight. The name tape still read Ghost. They hadn't even bothered making her a new one. As she grabbed her helmet, she caught her reflection in the darkened window. The gray streaks in her brown hair were more prominent now, crow's feet deeper around her eyes. But the determination burning there was the same as it had been over Kandahar, Baghdad, and a dozen other places where death had come calling. "How many search patterns have they already run?" she asked, following the SEALs toward the door. 17, ma'am, found nothing. That's why they called you." She nodded, mind already calculating currents, thermoclines, and acoustic shadows. The Colorado's crew didn't know it yet, but Ghost was coming for them. The same Ghost who'd pulled off 12 impossible rescues when everyone else said to give up. The one who could read the ocean like others read maps. The SEALs flanked her as they moved through the empty corridors. Word had already spread. She could see ground crew running toward the hangar, preparing for something big. The lead SEAL spoke into his radio. Package secured. Ghost is walking. Through the windows, she could see her aircraft, an EA-18G Growler, the electronic warfare variant of the Super Hornet. Not pretty, bristling with sensor pods and communication arrays, but perfect for what was coming. They'd given her the most sophisticated search platform in the inventory. "There's one more thing, ma'am," the SEAL said as they approached the exit. "The Colorado was carrying something classified, something that absolutely cannot fall into enemy hands." "Enemy hands?" Ghost stopped. "You think this wasn't an accident?" "We don't know, but Chinese and Russian naval assets are converging on the search area. Whatever happened to the Colorado, we need to find her first." The desert wind hit them as they stepped outside, carrying the smell of jet fuel and heated metal. Ahead, the Growler sat bathed in the harsh glare of work lights, ground crew swarming over it like ants. Ghost could see the auxiliary fuel tanks being mounted, extending her range for the long flight ahead. They were sending her into the deep Pacific, where the nearest land was 1,000 miles away, and the ocean floor was farther down than Mount Everest was tall. The young faces of Reaper Squadron would be waiting, skeptical of the middle-aged instructor suddenly placed in command. They'd heard the stories, sure, everyone had, but stories were just that until proven otherwise. They didn't know that Ghost wasn't just a call sign. It was earned over the Hindu Kush, when she'd flown through a mountain pass so narrow her wingtips scraped rock, pursuing a target everyone else had given up on. She'd emerged from the canyon like a specter, hence the name. The roar of engines filled the night as they approached the aircraft. Her crew chief, Senior Chief Martinez, stood at attention by the ladder. His face was grave. He'd been maintaining her aircraft for 5 years, had seen her relegated to training flights. Now she was about to take his bird into harm's way. "She's ready, ma'am. Every system triple-checked. You're carrying the new deepwater sensor package. It's experimental, but it's the best chance we have." Ghost nodded, running her hand along the Growler's fuselage. The metal was warm, alive with potential energy. How experimental. "It can detect a submarine's reactor signature through 2 miles of water, theoretically. Never been tested at the depths you'll be searching." "First time for everything, Senior." She climbed the ladder with practiced efficiency, settling into the ejection seat like coming home. The cockpit wrapped around her, displays flickering to life. Her hands found every switch by memory, beginning the startup sequence that was carved into her bones. The SEAL team had backed away, but their leader called up. "Ma'am, those 140 souls, some of them are barely older than kids. First deployment for half the boat." Ghost paused in her pre-flight check, looking down at him. "They all come home. That's not a hope, son, that's a promise." The canopy lowered with a hydraulic hiss, sealing her into her element. The familiar smell of electronics, hydraulic fluid, and recycled air filled her lungs. Outside, the ground crew pulled away the chocks and ladder. Martinez gave her a thumbs up, then pressed his hand to his heart, an old gesture between them, from the bad days in Afghanistan when every launch might be the last. Radio chatter crackled to life in her helmet. "Ghost, this is Tower. You're cleared for immediate departure. Reaper flight is holding at Angels 30, bearing 270, 100 miles off the coast. Weather warning for your destination, tropical depression forming, seas at State 5 and building." "Copy, Tower. Ghost is rolling." She pushed the throttles forward, feeling the Growler surge beneath her. The runway lights blurred past as she rotated, pulling the stick back. The aircraft leaped into the darkness, climbing hard into the star-filled Nevada sky. At 15,000 feet, she could see the lights of Reno to the west, the vast darkness of the desert to the east. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, past the California coast, a submarine full of young sailors was waiting in the crushing darkness of the deep ocean, their air growing thinner with each passing hour. The mathematics were cruel. Nuclear submarines could last weeks underwater, but once something went wrong, time became the enemy. If the Colorado had suffered catastrophic decompression, they might already be too late. If the pressure hull was intact but systems were failing, they might have days, maybe less. Ghost Reaper Lead, a young voice crackled over the radio. We're on your 3 o'clock, 10 miles, ready to form up. She glanced right, seeing the navigation lights of 4 Super Hornets holding in a precise formation. These were the Navy's best, combat veterans despite their youth, trained for missions nobody was supposed to talk about. Yet they were waiting for her to take charge. Reaper Lead Ghost, I'm taking tactical command. Maintain current heading, climb to Angels 35. We're going to push hard to the search area, time is not our friend. Copy Ghost, be advised we've been briefed on your background. It's an honor to fly with you, ma'am. The respect in his voice was genuine but tentative. They'd been told who she was, but respect in the aviation community was earned in the air, not in briefing rooms. That would come later, if at all. Ghost pushed her throttles to military power, the Growler surging forward. Reaper flight, tactical spread, 2-mile intervals. I want full sensor sweep starting now. If the Colorado tried to surface and failed, there might be debris. Oil slicks, emergency beacons, anything. The ocean doesn't give up secrets easily. The flight spread out, 5 aircraft racing west through the night at 600 miles per hour. Below, the dark expanse of the Pacific stretched endlessly, holding its secrets close. Ghost activated her sensor suite, watching the displays populate with data. Shipping traffic appeared as bright dots on her screen, cargo vessels, fishing boats, a cruise ship heading for Hawaii, but no sign of the Colorado. Ghost Reaper 3. I'm picking up unusual comms traffic. Encrypted, but the pattern suggests Chinese naval frequencies. Copy 3, they're looking too. Stay sharp, we're not the only ones hunting tonight. The radio fell silent for a moment, then Reaper Lead spoke again. Ma'am, can I ask you something? The brief said you found the Thresher back in 03 when everyone said it was impossible. That was in water even deeper than this. How? Ghost smiled grimly behind her oxygen mask. The Thresher, another submarine lost in the depths, though that one had been gone for decades when she'd located the debris field. It had been a training mission that turned real when families begged for closure. You don't look for the submarine, Lieutenant. You look for what the submarine changes. Water temperature, current patterns, acoustic shadows. The ocean is like a living thing. When something doesn't belong, it reacts. Roger that, but this search area is massive. We could fly patterns for weeks and miss it. Not if you know where to look. Ghost pulled up the oceanographic data on her display. The Colorado's last known position was here, but she was running deep and fast. Factor in the Kuroshio current, the thermocline at this time of year, and the acoustic properties of the trench. She's not where everyone's been looking. She input calculations, her mind working through variables the computers couldn't fully account for. Submarine commanders were trained to think in 3 dimensions, but when systems failed, human instinct took over. A dying sub would try to surface, fighting against physics and fate. If the Colorado had suffered a critical failure, her captain would have done everything to get his boat shallow, toward help. New search coordinates uploading to your systems, Ghost announced. We're heading 200 miles south of the current search area. Ma'am, that's completely outside the probability cone. Trust me, Lieutenant. I've been wrong before, but never about this. The flight banked south, racing toward coordinates that existed only in Ghost's intuition. Behind them, the California coast disappeared into darkness. Ahead lay the vast Pacific, keeper of secrets, graveyard of ships and aircraft that had dared to challenge its depths. But Ghost had stared into those depths before and emerged victorious. The Colorado's crew didn't know her name, didn't know she was coming, but she would find them. She had to. The weight of command settled on her shoulders like an old, familiar coat. This was why they'd pulled her from her quiet exile in the instructor's seat. Not for her reflexes or her eyesight, both diminished by age and combat. They needed her for this. the ability to think like the ocean itself, to understand the poetry of currents and pressure that no computer could fully model. Ghost Reaper 2, radar contact bearing 180, large surface vessel not squawking civilian transponder. Ghost checked her scope. 20 miles south, a ship running dark except for navigation lights. Could be a fishing vessel avoiding regulations, could be something more sinister. Mark it and continue. We're not here for surface contacts unless they interfere with the rescue. The Growler's engines hummed steadily, pushing through the thin air at altitude. 500 miles from the coast now, entering the true deep water where the bottom was miles down and the pressure could crush a submarine like an empty beer can. This was where the ocean kept its darkest secrets, where ships vanished without trace and planes disappeared into mythology. Ghost's mind drifted to the Colorado's crew, imagining them in the darkness. Emergency lighting only, conserving power. The youngest sailors trying to stay brave while the veterans counted the hours of air remaining, knowing the math better than they'd admit. The captain, probably standing in the control room, maintaining calm while his mind raced through options. She'd been in enough disasters to know the rhythm, initial panic, forced calm, then the slow creep of despair as options dwindled. But Ghost was coming. 5 aircraft loaded with the most sophisticated sensors ever designed, led by a pilot who'd made a career of achieving the impossible. The Colorado just had to hold on a little longer. Passing feet wet, Reaper Lead announced as they crossed the last threshold of land-based radar coverage. They were truly in the open ocean now, beyond easy rescue if something went wrong. Each pilot would be checking their fuel, calculating their point of no return. For Ghost, that point had passed long ago, not in miles, but in commitment. The radio crackled with a new voice, older, authoritative. Ghost, this is Admiral Reeves aboard the USS Princeton. We're coordinating surface search 100 miles from your position. Glad to have you in the game. Reeves. They'd served together in the Gulf, back when Ghost was a lieutenant and Reeves commanded a destroyer. He'd recommended her for the Silver Star after she'd guided his ship through a minefield using nothing but her aircraft's sensors and steady nerves. Good to be back, Admiral. We're proceeding to new search coordinates. I'll need the Princeton to vector south, prepare for possible submarine emergency surface. Ghost, those coordinates are well outside. Sir, with respect, the Colorado isn't where we've been looking. She's running on instinct now, not procedure. Trust me on this. A pause then. Roger that, Ghost. Princeton is coming about. You always did see things others missed. Find our boys and girls. The connection clicked off. Ghost allowed herself a thin smile. Faith, that's what this was about. Faith in experience, in intuition honed by decades of flying over dark water. The younger pilots in Reaper Squadron didn't have that faith yet. They trusted their instruments, their training, the probability cones generated by supercomputers. But the ocean didn't care about probability. It had its own logic, ancient and unforgiving. Ghost, we're approaching your search coordinates, Reaper Lead announced. Beginning sensor sweep. All Reaper elements descend to Angels 5. We need to get close to the water for the magnetometers to work. Watch your fuel, we're at maximum range. The flight of Growlers and Super Hornets dove toward the dark Pacific, leveling off just 5,000 feet above the waves. At this altitude, they could see the ocean's surface, rolling swells that looked deceptively gentle from above but were actually 30-foot mountains of water. The weather was deteriorating, as predicted. Within hours, these seas would be too rough for any rescue operation. Ghost activated her experimental deep-water sensor package, watching the display populate with data. The ocean below was layered like a cake, different temperatures, salinities and pressures creating invisible barriers that could hide a submarine or trap its distress signal. She'd learned to read these layers like sheet music, understanding their harmonies and discordances. I'm getting something, Reaper 3 called out. Metallic signature bearing 270, very faint. Ghost swung her aircraft toward the contact, sensors straining to penetrate the miles of water below. There, an anomaly in the magnetic field, too regular to be geological. Her heart rate increased slightly, the first physical sign of excitement she'd allowed herself. All aircraft converge on Reaper 3's position. Deploy sonobuoys in standard pattern. If she's down there, we'll hear her. The sonobuoy splashed into the dark water, immediately beginning to transmit acoustic data. Ghost listened through her headset, sorting through the noise of the ocean, whale songs, distant ship engines, the creak and groan of the earth itself. And then, faint but unmistakable, a rhythmic metallic banging. "Hull tapping," she announced, voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. "Someone's alive down there, they're signaling." The radio exploded with chatter as the implication sank in. Ghost was already working the problem. The tapping was weak, suggesting the Colorado was deep, probably beyond conventional rescue depth. But the pattern was deliberate: 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS in Morse code. Universal distress signal. Ghost Reaper lead. How do we get them up at that depth? One problem at a time, Lieutenant. First, we establish communication. Reaper 2, do you have the underwater telephone equipped? Affirmative, Ghost, ready to deploy. Drop it directly over the contact. Everyone else, maintain position and keep scanning. If the Colorado is here, she's not alone. I want to know about every ship within 50 miles. The underwater telephone, a simple device that converted sound waves through water, splashed down. Ghost switched to the appropriate frequency, hearing the static of the deep ocean. Then, through the noise, a voice. Weak, distorted by pressure and distance, but human. "Any station, this is USS Colorado. Critical systems failure. 132 souls aboard. Request immediate assistance." 132. 8 souls already lost. Ghost pushed the emotion aside. There would be time for grief later. "Colorado, this is Lieutenant Commander Kowalski, call sign Ghost. We have your position. Rescue assets are en route. What's your depth and condition?" A long pause, then. "Ghost, the Ghost. Ma'am, we're at 800 feet, stuck in a thermal layer. Hull breach in the engine room, sealed, but we've lost propulsion. Battery power critical. Maybe 6 hours of life support remaining." 800 feet. Beyond the reach of most rescue submarines. The mathematics were getting worse by the minute. "Colorado, understand your situation. Can you emergency blow?" Negative, Ghost. Ballast tanks are damaged. We tried 12 hours ago, got to 600 feet, then sank back. We've been tapping ever since, hoping someone would hear. Ghost's mind raced through options. The deep submergence rescue vehicle would take too long to arrive. Traditional methods wouldn't work at this depth with a damaged submarine. But there was one possibility, dangerous and untested. "Colorado, stand by. We're working the problem." She switched to the tactical frequency. "Admiral Reeves, Ghost. I have the Colorado at 800 feet, hull breach, no propulsion, 6 hours of air. Requesting immediate deployment of the emergency lift bags from Pearl Harbor." "Ghost, those are experimental, never tested on a Seawolf-class boat." "Sir, it's that or we lose them. The weather's deteriorating. By the time the DSRV arrives, these seas will be too rough for recovery operations." Another pause. Ghost could imagine the discussion on the Princeton's bridge. Admirals and captains weighing options, all bad. "Ghost, Reaper 4. Multiple surface contacts approaching from the west. Looks like a Chinese task force, including what appears to be a salvage vessel." The stakes had just increased. Ghost keyed her radio. "Admiral, we have competition inbound. Whatever the Colorado was carrying, others want it too." "Understood, Ghost. The lift bags are being loaded onto Ospreys now. ETA your position in 3 hours. Can you hold?" Ghost looked at her fuel gauge. They'd be running on fumes by then, but that was secondary. "We'll hold, Admiral. Nobody else is getting to our people." She switched back to the underwater telephone. Colorado, help is coming. Experimental lift bags should be enough to get you shallow for conventional rescue. You need to prepare your crew for rapid ascent. Ghost, our hull won't take much more pressure change. The breach is barely holding. Captain, you're out of options. It's rise or die. I'll be overhead the entire time. If something goes wrong, we'll know immediately. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Why'd they send you? No offense, but we were expecting someone younger, faster, with better eyes. Ghost smiled grimly. Captain, I've pulled 7 submarines out of situations like this. Your boat is going to be number 8. That's not optimism, it's experience. Now stop talking and start preparing your crew. You're burning oxygen. She clicked off, returning her attention to the tactical situation. The Chinese ships were approaching fast, clearly aware they'd found something. Ghost made a decision that would have given her younger self pause. Reaper flight, we're going to discourage our visitors. Weapons free, but do not fire unless fired upon. Make it clear this is our rescue area. Ghost, that could start an international incident. Lieutenant, 132 American sailors trump diplomatic concerns. Follow my lead. She banked the growler toward the approaching ships, activating her electronic warfare suite. The AN/ALQ-218 receiver began mapping the electronic emissions from the Chinese vessels, while the ALQ-99 jamming pods powered up. Within seconds, she was broadcasting enough electromagnetic noise to blind every radar within 50 miles. Reaper flight pattern Alpha, let them know we're here. The 5 aircraft spread into an aggressive combat formation, racing toward the Chinese ships at wave-top height. At the last moment they pulled up, afterburners lighting the night sky as they rocketed vertical directly over the vessels. The message was clear: this is our operation. Stay back. Ghost threat receiver lit up. The Chinese ships were painting them with fire control radar. The game of chicken had begun. She steadied her voice. Reaper flight, maintain position. They won't shoot first. Ghost, how do you know? Because I've done this dance before, Lieutenant. They're testing us, seeing how committed we are. The answer is completely. For long moments, the two forces faced off, 5 aircraft against a naval squadron, with a dying submarine as the prize. Then slowly, the Chinese ships began to turn away, maintaining distance but not withdrawing completely. They would wait, watch, and act if the Americans failed. Good call, Ghost, Reaper lead said, respect evident in his voice. It's not over. They'll be back if we fail. Reaper 2 and 3 maintained surveillance on our visitors, everyone else back to the Colorado. The next 2 hours crawled by. Ghost managed her fuel carefully, calculating exactly how long she could remain on station. The other aircraft took turns refueling from a tanker that appeared from the east, but Ghost remained overhead, maintaining contact with the Colorado. The submarine situation was deteriorating. Battery power was failing, carbon dioxide levels rising. The crew had moved to the forward compartments, away from the breach, but space was limited. The captain, Commander Michael Reyes, maintained discipline, but Ghost could hear the strain in his voice during their periodic check-ins. Ghost, this is Reaper lead. Osprey flight inbound 5 minutes out. She looked east, seeing the distinctive twin-rotor aircraft approaching fast and low. 3 of them, carrying the experimental lift bags, and a team of Navy divers who would have to work in darkness 800 feet down. Colorado, the cavalry has arrived. Stand by for lift bag deployment. What followed was controlled chaos. The Ospreys hovered over the submarine's position, lowering divers and equipment into the churning seas. Ghost coordinated from above, using her sensors to guide the divers to the submarine's exact position. The lift bags, essentially giant balloons that would be attached to the Colorado's hull and inflated, had to be positioned precisely. Ghost lead diver, we've located the boat. Jesus, she's in bad shape. The hull breach is worse than reported. Can you attach the bags? We'll make it work, ma'am. Give us 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Ghost checked her fuel, running on vapors now. She'd have to leave soon, but not yet. Not until the Colorado was rising. The work below continued, invisible from the surface but tracked by sonobuoys. The divers worked in pairs, fighting current and pressure to attach the lift bags to the submarine's hull. One bag tore on a damaged antenna array. Another failed to inflate properly. But slowly, gradually, they were succeeding. Ghost were ready to inflate, on your command. She looked at her instruments one last time, calculating ascent rates and pressure differentials. Too fast and the hull would rupture. Too slow and they'd run out of air. Colorado, this is Ghost. Prepare for emergency ascent. It's going to be rough. Ready, Ghost, and ma'am, thank you. Thank me when you're breathing surface air. Divers, inflate the bags. Gradual pressure increase, monitor for hull stress. The ocean below began to churn as compressed air filled the giant bags. Slowly, impossibly, 8,000 tons of submarine began to rise from the depths. Ghost monitored the ascent rate, 10 feet, 20, 50. Hull stress increasing, the Colorado reported. We're getting compression warnings. Maintain ascent, you'll hold. 100 feet, 200. The submarine rose like a dying whale seeking one last breath. At 400 feet, one of the lift bags exploded, the ascent rate dropping dramatically. We're stalling, the captain reported. Not enough buoyancy. Ghost made the calculation instantly. They needed more lift, but there were no more bags, unless... All divers, emergency ascent now. Colorado, blow all remaining ballast. Emergency, blow everything you have left. Ghost, our tanks are damaged. Do it now, Commander, everything you have. The submarine shuddered, compressed air screaming from damaged tanks. It wasn't much, but combined with the remaining lift bags, it was enough. The Colorado continued rising, breaking through the thermal layer that had trapped her. 300 feet, 200, 100. And then, like a breaching whale, the USS Colorado's sail burst through the surface of the Pacific, black against the pre-dawn darkness. Cheers erupted across all radio frequencies as the submarine wallowed in the heavy seas, damaged but alive. Colorado is on the surface, Ghost announced, her voice finally showing emotion. All rescue vessels converge for personnel evacuation. Her fuel warning light had been red for 10 minutes. Time to go. As she turned toward the tanker waiting to the east, she allowed herself one look back. The Colorado was surrounded by rescue vessels, helicopters hovering overhead as crew members emerged from the hatches. 132 souls who would see another sunrise. Ghost, this is Commander Reyes. I owe you a drink. Hell, I owe you my life. You owe me nothing, Commander. This is what we do. Welcome back to the world. As Ghost climbed toward the tanker, Reaper lead pulled alongside, close enough that she could see the young pilot's face through his visor. He saluted, a gesture rarely seen in the air, reserved for moments of genuine respect. Ma'am, that was. I've never seen anything like it. How did you know where to look? How did you know the lift bags would work? Ghost thought for a moment before responding. Lieutenant, machines and computers will tell you what's probable. Experience tells you what's possible. And sometimes faith tells you what's necessary. The sun was rising as Ghost connected with the tanker, taking on enough fuel to make it back to land. Below, the Colorado was being towed toward safer waters, her crew evacuating to surface ships. The Chinese task force had withdrawn, their opportunity lost. But Ghost's mission wasn't over. As she disconnected from the tanker, Admiral Reeves came on the radio. Ghost, outstanding work. There's a carrier waiting for you, the Nimitz. SecDef wants you to brief the battle group on what just happened. Sir, I'm just an instructor pilot, maybe someone else. Vieira, cut the humble act. You just prevented an international incident, saved a submarine, and reminded everyone why experience matters. Besides, there's something else. The Colorado wasn't just carrying classified material. There were 3 foreign intelligence operatives aboard being transported for interrogation. They're why everyone was so interested. Ghost absorbed this information, understanding now why the SEALs had burst into her ready room. This hadn't just been about saving sailors. It had been about protecting national security. Understood, Admiral, heading for the Nimitz. The carrier appeared on the horizon, a floating city of steel bristling with aircraft. As Ghost approached, she could see sailors lining the deck, watching her arrival. Word had spread through the fleet's communication networks. The forgotten instructor pilot who'd saved the impossible submarine. Ghost, Nimitz Tower, you're cleared for immediate landing. The Admiral is waiting. She brought the growler down perfectly, catching the 3-wire and feeling the violent deceleration of an arrested landing. As her aircraft was towed to parking, she could see the gathered brass waiting, admirals, captains, intelligence officers. They needed to understand what had happened, how she'd found the Colorado when nobody else could. But first, Ghost sat in her cockpit for a moment, engines winding down, watching the sun paint the Pacific gold. She thought about the Colorado's crew, probably drinking coffee on rescue ships, calling families, processing their brush with death. She thought about the young pilots of Reaper Squadron, who'd learned that technology was a tool, not a replacement for human intuition. The ground crew was attaching the ladder. Time to face the spotlight she'd avoided for 2 years. But something had changed during the night. The doubt that had plagued her since the accident in Syria, the friendly fire incident that had ended her combat flying career, had finally lifted. She'd proven to herself what others had never doubted, that Lieutenant Commander Vera "Ghost" Kowalski still had something to offer. As she climbed down from the aircraft, Senior Chief Martinez was waiting. Somehow, he'd gotten himself flown to the carrier. "Welcome back, Ghost," he said simply. "I never left, Senior. I was just waiting." "For what, ma'am?" She looked back at her growler, then at the assembled officers waiting to debrief her. For a reminder that the mission isn't about being the fastest or the youngest. It's about bringing everyone home. The debrief took 4 hours. Ghost stood before a room of senior officers, walking them through every decision, every intuition that had led to finding the Colorado. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in her confrontation with the Chinese vessels, how she'd known they wouldn't fire. "Pattern recognition," she explained. "I've faced similar situations 17 times in my career. Their radar signatures, their formation, the timing of their moves, it all suggested probing, not aggression. They were testing our resolve." "And if you'd been wrong?" an admiral asked. "Then we'd have fought. But losing the Colorado would have been worse than any diplomatic incident." Vice Admiral Thompson, commander of the Pacific Fleet's submarine force, stood. "Commander, you saved 132 of my people. The Navy owes you a debt." "The Navy owes me nothing, sir. I did my job." "No, you did much more. Which brings me to our next point. Your flight status has been fully reinstated. More than that, we want you to take command of a new unit we're forming, Deep Water Search and Rescue. Your experience is invaluable." Ghost felt the weight of the offer, a chance to return to full duty to lead again. But she thought of her notebook back at Fallen, the young pilots who still needed instruction, the lessons that needed passing on. "Sir, I'm honored, but my place is in the training squadron. Those kids need to learn what can't be taught in simulators." Thompson smiled. "I thought you might say that. So here's the deal: you continue as an instructor, but you're also on call for situations like this. When we need the impossible done, we call Ghost." It was a perfect compromise. Ghost nodded her acceptance. As the meeting broke up, Commander Reyes was wheeled in, exhausted but alive. He'd refused medical evacuation until all his crew were safe. Seeing Ghost, he struggled to stand, saluting despite his obvious pain. At ease, Commander, Ghost said. How's your crew? Alive, thanks to you. 8 didn't make it from the initial breach, but the rest. His voice caught. Ma'am, when we heard your voice on that underwater telephone, it was like hearing an angel. I'm no angel, Commander. Just a pilot who's been around long enough to know where to look. That's what I don't understand. Everyone was searching north. The computers,